Hello, everybody. This is Angel Arts, and welcome to a very special Let's Talk episode slash podcast episode. Today, I am going to be chatting about Mass Effect Andromeda. I have four of my YouTube friends that have asked to participate, or I have actually asked if they would like to participate in this little podcast. You probably recognize many of them. So why don't we start by first introducing ourselves. So for each person, let us know how you would give us your name and where you are from. And then the last question is if it helps for you to not take Andromeda in consideration for this question, you may do so. What is it about the Mass Effect franchise that entices you? What is it about the Mass Effect franchise that you really enjoy? Or why do you play the Mass Effect franchise? And if you need to disregard Andromeda for that, that is your prerogative. So, why don't we start with my oldest friend, and by oldest I mean I've known him longest, not because he's any older than myself, even though he is, but slightly, not that much, but not much.
Smooth.
Slightly.
Very smooth.
Let's start with the Artifactor is now how you're referred to as?
Yes. Oh, great. So yeah, hi, I'm David, also known as Artifactor these days. I'm from Sweden, as you can probably hear from my accent, if I have one still. And for me, Mass Effect, personally, and I think this is something that many is gonna say, is that Mass Effect is about the characters and the story. It's about, bonding, hearing their stories, and that I think is the most important aspect for me personally of a Mass Effect game. That it's a sci-fi setting just helps. So yeah, that's me.
And we'll ask one more question when you introduce yourself, and that question is, what is your go-to class of choice? And we'll assume the classic classes, and by that, Vanguard versus Soldier versus Adept. What's your go-to?
Standard 6.
There's six of them. So yeah, what would be your go-to?
Well, my go-to class is Engineer.
Okay.
I play Engineer for 1, 2, 3, and Andromeda, so yes.
Okay. Why don't we go next with Mikey? Mikey, why don't you go next?
My name is Mikey. I am from Ireland. My social security number is as follows. Please refer to veterans for more details. Well, I think we can all thank David for stealing all of our responses for what we like most about Mass Effect as a series. The characters, the bonding between those characters, dialogue, story, excellent, general. David's kind of stolen all of our answers, I think. So,
You're welcome.
That's because David gave the correct answer.
Yeah,
this is true. David gave the correct answer, and he gave it the most concisely. So just refer to David's answer if you're looking for my answer for what I find the best about it. My go-to class was always Sentinel, just because I like being the tank, the healer, the buff. I like being at the forefront of combat and being able to do a little bit of everything to help everybody out. That was always my kind of thing. So I'm a paladin. Yeah, that's basically how I put this. I'm a paladin player. I like paladins, so Sentinel was like, yeah, obviously Sentinel, perfect for me.
Okay. Evan, why don't you go next?
Hi, I'm Evan, or Evan ED. I'm from Wisconsin. I actually have a slightly different answer, which is that I really like the Mass Effect setting. So when I first played Mass Effect 1, you're sort of dumped into the Citadel. And actually, I should probably give a little bit more background, which is that Mass Effect 1 is the first BioWare RPG that I played. But I got dumped into this Citadel where you've got all these different species and races, and you're sort of exploring around. And what I really liked about it was that once the Reapers sort of showed up, kind of changed away from this a bit, but I felt like it was a really optimistic and yet sort of realistic view of what the future could look like.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that it sort of struck the same kind of nerve as Star Trek did in me, and I'm also a big fan of Star Trek. And the characters and the story, those are also great, but that was what I was originally drawn to, was sort of the overall picture of like, we can do this. What could we do if we had space travel and we ran into all of these other species? And so sort of the setting is my picture there. So I'm not sure that I have exactly a go-to class. I played Mass Effect 1 many times across the whole spectrum. I think Adept was probably my favorite because you're like lift, throw, and all that jazz. And then in 2 and 3, I had a lot of fun playing Vanguard as well. The charge ability actually was an absolute blast, I thought. So, but I would not exactly say that that's a canon or a go-to class for me.
Mm-hmm. Great answer. Thank you, Evan. Mark.
Hi, so I'm Mark, or the Soulman NLG. I'm from New Jersey. And when it comes to the Mass Effect series, specifically the Mass Effect trilogy, besides the story and the characters, which obviously everyone loves, I think what fascinates me most about it was the fact that you can make decisions in one game and your decisions can carry over to the next and the next. And at the time, it's like, to me, that was just unheard of. Like, I was playing games, I wasn't really paying attention to the stories, I was just focused on the game, because I was like a teenager. I wasn't really thinking about these things, but then I matured and I started paying attention more to the narrative and the characters, and then this game came along. At the time, Mass Effect 2 was coming out, so I bought Mass Effect 1, I played it, I made all these choices, I perfected my save file for Mass Effect 2, and I played Mass Effect 2, I absolutely loved it, and I waited for Mass Effect 3, I played Mass Effect 3, and it was just a great time. And when it comes to my favorite class, I would say my canon class is Soldier, but I really love Vanguard. Vanguard's fun.
So for myself, for those of you who don't know who I am, hi, my name is Angel Arts. Also, you can call me Hark if you'd like. And the reason why I really got into the Mass Effect series, again, to piggyback off of everything that everybody else said that they love about the series, my first experience with a BioWare game, period, was Knights of the Old Republic, which I absolutely loved. I was not, I know a lot of you might gasp watching this, I wasn't a heavy Star Wars fan. I liked Star Wars, but I think, like, compared to the average person, it wasn't like my absolute favorite thing in the world, but I enjoyed watching the movies. And somebody told me that I should play this game. This is when it came out, relatively recently at the time. And I told them, I said, well, I like RPGs, but I'm not really that into Star Wars. And they said, you should play this game anyway, because the story is just that great. And that was my first experience having a game where the story was actually really deep and the character development was really deep. And you could like romance characters, or you could be good or bad or light or dark, which I loved. So BioWare was really good about telling a good story where it didn't matter that it was on a universe that I was just, so about. Then I played Dragon Age, again, not knowing that really who BioWare was, and I absolutely loved Dragon Age for those reasons. And then Mass Effect was a franchise that I sort of avoided for a while, because I wasn't really big into shooters. It wasn't really my thing. I felt that shooters tended to have shallower stories in my experience, and somebody eventually convinced me. This was after Mass Effect 2 was released. I think it had been released for like 4 months already, to at least try the original Mass Effect. And I ended up loving it. because I thought that it had the perfect mix between RPG and action, so that action RPG genre. People could argue that it sort of lost a lot of its RPG elements over the years, but the main elements that you guys have already talked about was still there, as in the deep characters, the storytelling, as well as the fact that you can make a lot of major decisions that continue throughout the series. I thought was really ingenious, and that was pretty much how I gravitated towards the series. So let's now talk about Mass Effect Andromeda. That is the whole point of this discussion. There are a lot of very strong opinions of this game. Anyone who has perused through the internet, the interwebs, probably have noticed that there's a lot of strong opinions. And we just wanted to have a little forum where we could sit down and talk about it. Understand that everything that you see here is purely our opinions. All of you who are watching are definitely welcome to disagree, agree, whatever. Just know that these are our opinions and our experiences with this game, and all of us who are here in this panel understand that too. And I just wanted to have a very nice civil discussion over Andromeda. So how do you guys, I'm leaving it up to the four of you to decide how this discussion gets driven. So do you want to talk about what you like about the game? Do you want to just talk about the controversy surrounding the game? Do you want to talk, how do you guys want to do this, I guess?
Well, won't take as long to talk about as the controversies. Can we be honest about that? Because the game itself is pretty good all in all, but the controversies around it is a lot of the discussion now, and well, was up until EA announced, hey, we're done. So
I think that's fair.
There.
I feel like
move to the game afterwards.
Yeah, I feel like the controversy is definitely in a lot of people's minds. So I think starting with that and addressing it up front would probably be a good thing. It's so just in general, like, I know that a lot of people have had opinions on the quality of this game because of the team that was working on it, and the team that was working on it is no longer exists, apparently. BioWare shut them down, probably because of the performance that the game ended up having in the stores, and the very vocal opinions that were shared by a lot of fans of the game. What are your guys' thoughts on all of that? On the reaction?
Do you mind if I start?
Go ahead, Mikey. I think you have a lot to say about it, so go right ahead.
Okay, grab your popcorn. So to start, we actually know that Andromeda sold well enough for EA to mention it. I think 3 times in their what's it called? Their revenue discussion with their shareholders, and they said Mass Effect Andromeda pushed physical and digital sales. So technically, I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that the game sold poorly. It's got a lot more to do with the fact that the Metacritic rate is currently at 71. It might have gone up or down, depending. But I know that the Metacritic rate is only at 70. It's more likely to do with the fact that people don't like the game, and I like to put it this way: Mass Effect Andromeda didn't die on store shelves. It was killed by the memes and the internet reaction to seeing the animations and the poor dialogue at times and the poor story at times and just stuff that's funny. I'll throw it up the internet with a caption, and I'll get a few retweets for it, that kind of thing. But then people started noticing that there was a lot of problems with this game, with the game's development. There's been a lot of talk about how even though there was a 5-year development period, for about 3.5 years of that time there was no real focus. They were shooting for the stars, and they were starting to run out of time, and people started leaving. Casey Hudson left in 2014. There was other people who left. There was a plethora of people who left between 2014 and 2015 and 16. And between that and everything else going on, I was just like, well, we hope Mass Effect Andromeda at the very least has survived this, and it won't be delayed for another 3 or 4 years. Funny is, I think it was in May or April, there was a Kotaku report about how Mass Effect Andromeda was basically thrown out in 18 months. Most of the development of the game, most of the animations and stuff were outsourced. Basically, the entire game was made in 18 months by people who were so driven, ragged, and tired from the grind of those 18 months that they were just like, nah, I'm good. I'd rather never do this again. And of course, then EA went, all right, this game didn't do as well as we wanted, so we're shutting down BioWare Montreal and we're moving them to EA Motive and other studios across the EA board. Best of luck to all of them. Glad they still have a job. It's always nice. It's never nice to be told, hey, you're not working in this studio anymore, but hey, at the very least, they still have a job. That's a good thing. Then, of course, there's all of the DLC drama, of course, with the Aquarian arc and how it's no longer going to. Now there's no more DLC. There's no more content single player wise. It's all just going to be a book, if I remember correctly. Some quite popular writer, I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but that's basically where the Aquarian arc is coming from now. There's no more single player DLC after patch 1.10, which came out last month. There's not multiplayer stuff, which is another thing. They've basically stopped making any kind of single player stuff because they know at this stage that anyone who has an Andromeda isn't playing it for the single player anymore, they're playing it for the multiplayer. So they're like, all right, let's try and make some money while we have the chance. There's a lot more that I'm probably missing, but those are the major things that stuck in my head. And one thing that I will point out right now is that I don't blame EA as much as other people do, largely because back in, I want to say November of last year, they said publicly that they would delay this game for 5 months to 6 months at most if it needed it. It was up to BioWare Montreal to decide if they wanted that delay. So as far as I'm concerned, it's BioWare's fault that this game came out and didn't smash it out of the park like it should have. That's all I gotta say.
Okay.
Nice. Oh, I can follow up on that.
Go ahead.
First of all, great summary there,
Thank you,
Mr.
David.
Mikey.
Thank you.
So you have like all the things that were kind of iffy, and I have to say that Mass Effect Andromeda is probably my least favorite Mass Effect. I still liked it very much, but it is my least favorite Mass Effect, and I think it would have been better received if they had maybe 4 or 5 months more development time, because after the first few patches came out, I really liked it. Like the fixed animations, added some extra cutscenes, and by that, unfortunately, by that time it was kind of too late for many people who had gone on the. Well, you guys know how the internet is. It kind of amplifies the sound, and I can understand where they're coming from. Me personally, I didn't hate the game as much as many others. As I said, I actually enjoyed it very much. And if what Mikey says is true, that they made like the game in 18 months, that's an amazing effort. So kudos to the team for doing that. Then again, I never trusted Kotaku longer than I can throw out an elephant. So that said, me personally, I never really bothered very much with all the drama around the game because I was too busy playing the game and enjoying the game. There were a few times when the animations, I think it was one time when the animations kind of took me out of the moment, and I was like, oh, that is not fun. It was a very grand emotional scene, and like two characters had merged together, and it was like, oh, what is this? That was kind of sad. But other than that, I can't really say I have been affected by the drama surrounding Mass Effect Andromeda very much. I was too busy playing the game and enjoying the game, to be honest. So that's my answer to that.
Not as much drama in Andromeda. David.
Oh,
No.
God.
No harp, just no.
I was
Parks
waiting for
complained
that. I was
to a
waiting.
stream daddy. Parks complained to a stream daddy. You
I
need to
have
stop. Right? Stop it. Get some help.
Somebody speak before I do, please.
I have a couple of things that I can say. I think that what I would say is largely what David just said, where in some sense I didn't really pay too much attention to what was going on. I actually avoided almost all press releases and reviews and even the trailers, except for the teaser trailer that were released before the game. And I kind of heard rumblings, there's complaints about animations and other stuff, but I didn't actually read any reviews. Andromeda is actually, so my opinions on the game ratings differ very much from what I think the average player, but Andromeda is actually not my least favorite of this whole series. So I like 1 the best, and then of the original trilogy, 1 is the best, 3 is sort of in the middle, and then 2 was actually my least favorite. And Andromeda is somewhere right around where I would put 3. I'm not sure whether it's above or below. My opinion kind of changes. One sort of my overall take on the whole negative perception of the game is one largely of kind of frustration and worry about what it means for the series in the future. Because like I'm worried that maybe they'll come in and I think like Casey Hudson has sent out a tweet where he said like we'll evaluate what we want to do and like where we want to. It almost sounded like he was suggesting that maybe they wouldn't continue the Andromeda series, but I mean I might be reading too much into a tweet or something like that. And that would be I think it would. Go ahead.
If I can inject real quick. Boverson, I believe he's the CEO of EA, has stated that he would love to go back to the Mass Effect universe because it's a great universe with great fans, but there's incentive there as well that he's suggesting that Andromeda might never be revisited. So it's quite possible that Andromeda is done. Okay,
and I mean I think that's a pity because I think that there's a lot of potential in it. And one thing that I thought was really well done was that I thought that Andromeda had a lot of really difficult and morally gray decisions that you have to make during it. Potentially, like I felt that there were as many decisions like that in Andromeda as there were in the whole original series, in a way. I mean, including things on side missions like when you find the poachers who are hunting the Yavara, do you let them continue or do you stop? Like, I mean, to me, that was a really, really hard decision. And most of these decisions aren't followed up in, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but if they don't continue the Andromeda line, like it kind of feels like a letdown. So I think that I feel really frustrated in the sense that I think that the game received an undeservedly negative reception, and I think that it could harm the future because of it, and I think that that's really unfortunate. Yeah.
Mark?
Okay, so regarding the drama and controversy, so little prelude before Andromeda came out. So it was a really hyped up game, had a lot riding on it, and let's not forget the previous Mass Effect 3, had a controversy of its own with its ending. So with Andromeda, it's like in people's eyes, if this game was anything less than perfect, it was just going to get, criticized like very, very heavily. So with like the facial animations and all that, I didn't particularly mind them. I mean, were they immersion breaking? Sure, but it didn't ruin the game for me. But not only the facial animations, but also people have been complaining about the bad writing, like the writing is not up to snuff as the previous 3 games and other stuff. And for me personally, I do think Andromeda is a mixed bag. I do think it's my least favorite of the series. Again, not to say that it's a bad game, but because there's a lot of stuff that I really did like. Like I did like the grade choices. Like they got rid of Paragon and Renegade. That was an interesting decision. I do like that they brought back a vehicle in the form of the Nomad, because we all remember how infamous the Mako was in the first game, and I like that they refined it. That was fun. So it's like they had a lot of great ideas and they refined a lot of stuff, but unfortunately, it's just they couldn't execute all their ideas in a properly.
I have a question. Something that's very close to my heart when it comes to Mass Effect is the music, because all of the previous games have had some amazing set pieces, and I felt that was kind of lacking in this game. I had the main menu music, which was great. I loved it, but there wasn't any music where I went like, oh, this is amazing. I want to listen to this on Spotify on repeat, like I have on like Mass Effect 1 has several, 2 and 3 as well. I think it's one of those kind of shortcuts they had to make to push the game out. Maybe I don't know. I was kind of disappointed in that, to be honest, because I'm a huge guy when it comes to game music. I don't know if did any of you other guys feel like that?
So I can comment on that a little bit. To an extent, I agree. So for me, I definitely agree that Andromeda, I think, falls short of all 3 of the original games soundtrack-wise. And I do actually listen. I'm a fan of soundtracks. I listen to them a lot, just sort of on my own. And I went through Andromeda, and there were a couple tracks where I was like, this is actually pretty good. I don't remember this in game. But when I was playing the game, I very rarely noticed any of the music and stuff like that. So I do think that it probably suffered a little bit there. Now, that being said, I'm not convinced that taints my view of the game too much. I don't think that the music actually affects my perception of an individual game, more so as just, would I listen to the soundtrack outside of the game?
Okay, yeah. It's just I feel like it had such a big impact on me, like the ending song on like in Mass Effect 3, or the Suicide song in Mass Effect 2. It's just it adds so much to the game, and I felt like that's kind of sad. Even though I really like the game, so
yeah. Sorry, I think I would. Yes, I just have a quick thing to add, which is that I do agree that it does add something, like when it's there. On the other hand, I don't feel that it's missing when it's not. I think maybe that's the way to phrase it. Sorry, go ahead.
Like, I think that both of you have got it pretty down to key in that the scenes that needed good music have good music. The main menu music sounds perfect to me. I love the exploration music, sounds good to me. The combat music sounds pretty good on occasion as well. But the romance music is what I tend to find has je ne sais quoi, for lack of a better term. It doesn't have the proper kick of like the emotional feels that I felt when I first romanced Spectra, or when I went through and romanced who else did I romance? I romanced Suvi with my female writer in my second throw. Wasn't as romantic as I expected it to be. There are scenes where I kind of go, there could have been a little bit better music put in it, but there wasn't anything that kind of dragged it down to, disliking it. Then again, I listen to Doom 2016 soundtrack on repeat when I go to work, so maybe I'm not the best guy to ask.
I actually added my own music from machinimasound.com to some of the scenes, when you discover your father's intentions were, like that scene, the cutscene when he says goodbye to his wife, and it's completely silent. But if you add some sad music, the scene becomes awesome. I mean, it's like, and I just kind of feel it was a sad way to go. A missed opportunity, maybe.
Mm.
Yeah,
Not to be negative.
But when it comes, not to be negative. When it comes to the game itself, though, I would rate it on par with Mass Effect 1 overall, largely because Mass Effect 1's combat makes me want to punch something, and it's just so clunky and unrefined, and it feels slow when it should be quicker than what it is. It's very much a mixed bag of both games to me, but I tend to just put them both on the same kind of tier. So you could, as far as I'm concerned, Mass Effect 1 and Mass Effect Andromeda are basically equal on stance. It's just that Andromeda makes his points up in different ways.
Since you were talking about things being equal, I wanted to respond to my reaction to the whole controversy in general, because I just like Evan, I specifically ignored all of the reviews or press releases about the game because I find that quite often I won't always agree. Very often I will disagree with the mass about opinions of certain games, because not only are there games that I love that it seems like a good majority doesn't love, there are games that the vast majority seems to love, and I just think they're like, meh, they're okay. Like, again, this might sound very, some of you may be aghast by some of this, but I thought games like The Last of Us was meh.
Okay, I'm out.
I know. Just rage quit.
David just hangs up.
Okay, fine.
I thought The Last of Us was okay. I thought that Undertale was okay. I thought that, Life is Strange was okay. That I think David can argue with me on that. But at the same time, there are games like Mass Effect Andromeda that I ended up loving that the vast majority seem to disagree with. At least the vocal majority seem to disagree with. So I did mention when I finally beat the game, so I apologize because I did talk about this at length during my final thoughts of my Let's Play, is that the biggest surprise I had about the controversy is that if there was any game that I was the most disappointed in, I don't think there's been a BioWare game that was just horrible for me, that I just couldn't continue playing it, was Dragon Age 2. Again, two different franchises, I understand that, but I was vastly more disappointed in Dragon Age 2 compared to Dragon Age Origins, and I felt that I felt there would have been much more fodder for hate on Dragon Age 2 than I thought there ever could be in Andromeda, but it seemed like more people seemed to hate on Andromeda way more than people were hating on Mass Effect 2. And it just surprised me because I thought that if BioWare was going to drop a series or put a series on hiatus indefinitely, I thought that would have happened with Dragon Age 2 as opposed to Mass Effect with Mass Effect Andromeda. But it didn't. They still made Inquisition, and Inquisition, I felt fortunately, was a great comeback for them after Dragon Age 2. Hopefully they'll end up continuing with that in the fourth Dragon Age game that apparently is being developed right now. Not that I didn't think it was. So I think that was the biggest thing, is when I heard the announcement that they were not going to do anything else with the campaign for Andromeda, or maybe even Mass Effect in general, at least for a while, I was like, wow, why did that happen with Andromeda but not Dragon Age 2? That didn't make sense to me as much. But.
Yeah, and I think Mark kind of answered your question for you there, that the stakes were so high for Andromeda since the ending of Mass Effect 3 was kind of controversial.
That is true. Yes.
Which I loved, by the way. I loved that ending.
I enjoyed the ending too, but then again, I was in the minority in that, it seemed, or at least not within the vocal side of.
We need to be more vocal, Kark.
Apparently.
Summon your inner keyboard warrior, like Twitter.
There you go. Other thoughts?
Well, looking at what happened here, Dragon Age 2 still got like an 8.5 out of 10 on most retailers, while Andromeda only got a 7 for most things, which is a pretty steep, drop down.
Mm-hmm.
If you're thinking about it that way. So that could possibly be the reason why. Dragon Age 2 wasn't hated on as much as Andromeda, probably because of the fact that Dragon Age 2 was, the first time that, not the first time, but one of the few times that a game came out and everyone was like, nah, it's not bad, but it's not nearly as good as the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of think that BioWare has kind of worn out its, fans after Dragon Age 2, after Mass Effect 3's ending, and after a few other little bits and pieces that they've had. Like Dragon Age 2 kind of, how best to put this, it skirted all of the badness in the sense that it was a good story, just in a really badly designed game. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I actually have one more thought, which is that, again, I don't know how prevalent this is, but I have heard of some people complaining about Inquisition's sort of large world, open world sandbox feel over the more, it's non-linear, but it's still more directed stories from the earlier games. And then you have the same thing happening in Andromeda, where you have an even more linear game than the original Dragon Age games in the original trilogy of Mass Effect. And then you move to a very large, very long open world sandbox game for Andromeda. And I think a lot of people didn't like that aspect of Andromeda, including sort of to an extent myself. I felt that a lot of Andromeda's faults sort of fall out of the overall structure of the game. And if you have Inquisition, if your opinion, and I thought Inquisition did a lot better with it, it fit the game in Inquisition a lot better. But if your opinion was you didn't like that in Inquisition, or if you didn't like the Mass Effect 3 ending, and then you don't like the Inquisition open world sandbox, and then you don't like the Andromeda open world sandbox, I think that it sort of goes back, I think it was Mikey was just talking about how it's sort of mid-year losing patience with what you see as problems with the games. And then just to sort of one of my biggest complaints about Andromeda in a sense is that I actually really liked it, and I kind of like to go back and replay it. But part of my brain would not want to just replay, sort of go through the main story and a couple important side quests. I'd want to do more, but the game's it's kind of too long to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
and that's interesting. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, David.
Okay. I'm gonna comment on that because I feel like when I played Dragon Age Inquisition, I think it was the other way around. Anyway, when I played Dragon Age Inquisition.
Mass Effect Inquisition. I love it.
I felt like I came to a new area and there was a lot of things to do, and I was like, oh, I can't be bothered. I can't do all of this. But I never really had that feeling going into Mass Effect Andromeda and their open spaces. And I'm not really sure why, but I think, for me personally, I feel that the side quests, and I think Evan said this as well, they had more weight in them. They had some moral choices. Even side quests had some good moral choices. And I felt that the side quests were much more involved than Inquisition side quests where you collect 5 heads and come back.
Yeah.
MMO style. So that really surprised me with Andromeda. I was prepared to drive around in my little car collecting 5 cat heads and go back. But fortunately, that wasn't the case. And that is one of the aspects of the game which really surprised me, that I actually enjoyed doing all these quests, because in many cases, I felt some side quests were more well written than some of the main quests, almost. So and oh yeah, I'm gonna talk about the graphics later on when we get there, but yeah.
I'm kind of have to agree with David in that for both Inquisition and Andromeda, I would have to say that the open worldness is one of the major least favorite things about those games. I understand the appeal to an open world. I understand the appeal of exploring things. That was never really on top of my list when it came to what I consider fun in a game. But I did feel that the side quests in Andromeda were executed far better than Inquisition, in that there were far less fetch quests or things like fetch quests in Andromeda versus in Inquisition. And therefore, I guess it felt like it wasn't as bad. The open world aspect wasn't as bad in Andromeda versus in Inquisition. And I was afraid of that because I heard that the open worlds were a lot more massive in Andromeda than they were in Inquisition, and they were. It's just that you can drive around in them, and that helps, I think, a lot. Versus, you had mounts in Inquisition, but it wasn't nearly as fast as driving around in the Nomad. So it wasn't as bad for me, but I understand fully what Evan's trying to say with that.
Yeah, and let me just clarify. Like, I thought that, given that it was a sandbox game, I thought that the quests that they put into it were well done. And if you did have an open world Mass Effect game, then Andromeda would be a good candidate for it, because you're sort of arriving in this new galaxy and you have to explore what's going on. I just felt that in some ways it was kind of overwhelming, and it created problems that manifested in other ways. Like, it was easy to sequence break the game, where you talk to someone and they talk about you needing to do something that you already did and stuff like that.
And I personally also much prefer the Mass Effect 2 and 3 approach, with a tighter storytelling, more compact. It's just if it has to be open world, then I guess Mass Effect Andromeda did it pretty well. But I would prefer like Mass Effect 3 or 2. Like, such good games. I love it.
At the very least, we consider the environments we explored in Andromeda were beautiful.
Oh, so beautiful. Yes.
Do you want to talk about the graphics then, David, if we're talking about it?
Okay, so I'm lucky enough to have a very good computer. So I play this with maximum settings, 2K resolution, and it was gorgeous. Iladen, I think the desert planet. Oh, it was so beautiful. I almost get teary-eyed just thinking about it. It is by far the most, I think, in most cases, at least when it comes to environment, the most beautiful game. Of course, if you don't have the computer to back it up, it kind of falls back to Mass Effect 1 graphics. But if you have a computer that can handle it, just looking out over the horizon, over the Aladdin horizon, it's just amazing. I loved it. And I'm a sucker for good graphics. So, and even the combat, the particle effects, I even like the movements and animations in combat. All of that together just made it very impressive visually. So that was also one of the things that I was really impressed with when it came to Mass Effect Andromeda. And I've always been a big fan of the Frostbite engine. I'm a big fan of Battlefield and Battlefront games, which uses the same engine. And it has always been really good looking. So I know for many people don't often play BioWare games for the graphics, let's face it. But for me, as a person who really enjoys graphics, it was a real treat, and I'm very happy they took that route.
David is
one thing
David.
that I will say.
Go ahead.
David's just like graphics. Yes. But the one thing that I will say was great about all the facial animations is that all of the aliens looked beautiful. Vetra looked great. Her facial animations looked lovely. Jal looked amazing. All the Krogan look really good because in the first 3 games they looked really leathery and fishy, but now they look like, skin met with like a bony protrusion instead. And the strangest thing is that outside of the Asari and the humans, all the facial animation is beautiful. That's something that I will say. So.
And there's a scene at the end of the game where you talk to Kalu, and the lighting is just right, and it looks so good. It's like, wow, this is amazing. At least in that's one scene. So, yeah.
There's also the scenes that they added that you can skip, but where you're flying around in the ship between systems or between planets, I guess, is more important. And those were very stylized, but they were very gorgeous too. And I like the variety of systems in terms of graphics. Like you had that one where there's the black hole and you can kind of go up and see it, and you have all sorts of colored nebula. That was also really nice. I did appreciate being able to skip things, but
yeah.
That was something Harkin and I brought up in our first talk. Like, please let us skip these things.
Yeah, and they did it, which is good.
Yeah, the graphics are beautiful in this game. I mean, maybe if they were given a few more months of development time to really fine-tune everything, like this could have been one of the best-looking games on the current generation of consoles and PC. It's like, it's mind-blowing how great everything looks,
And actually, going back to David's comments about graphic settings, I thought it looked pretty. I mean, my standards are low, but I thought it looked pretty good even on. I think I had it like medium graphics or something like that. I have my system basically meets the minimum system requirements, and that's actually. There's a kind of funny story. I thought I was going to have to upgrade because like I would walk around the Hyperion and I was getting like 10 frames a second and sometimes stuttery. And so I opened up my computer to figure out what was going on, and a wire had gotten caught in the CPU fan and it wasn't even spinning, so it was throttling itself. Pulled that out and then started running a lot better. But even with sort of relatively low graphic settings, it looked quite good.
David's just very shallow and superficial when it comes to his games. When he plays games, he demands like the supermodels of games. They need to look good for him.
I mean that's why he loves Vetra so much. She's a supermodel.
There you go.
I have a problem. So the game kind of, when I played it, I think it was beta. It dipped under 55 frames per second on highest, and I was like, I need a new graphics card. This is unacceptable. So that day, I went out and bought a new graphics card.
Wow.
So okay, here we go.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I have a problem, and I have accepted it.
Yes.
Wait it.
That's right.
Your Let's Play looks fantastic.
Use your money more wisely.
Your Let's Play videos were way better quality than mine in that respect. So more power to you, David.
Yeah. I mean, we can probably just assume that, let's be honest, right? It's Frostbite, and Frostbite always manages to make things look good no matter what it kind of is. As long as there's time and effort put into it, it'll look good. So, it's not very hard to make something look good in Frostbite. It's kind of hard to make something run well, like an RPG in Frostbite, which is what I've heard. That both Edmonton and Montreal struggled with developing an RPG for the Frostbite engine because it's not really designed for RPG-style things.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be a possible reason why it took so long to get things to work. Because I'm reading another article about how they were considering making like randomly generated planets. It's like there'd be an area that you land in that's been fully generated by itself. That's like been fine-tuned, so that way that's your area. That's the hub area of that planet, and then the rest of it's kind of what the planet is. So like if you're on like an Earth-like planet, it'd have like a lot of Earth-like things to it. Lots of green fields, mountains, that kind of thing. But they scrapped that because they couldn't figure out a way to get Frostbite to run a algorithm that made the planets look individual and different without having to touch them up by themselves. So that just took extra time. So it could be that Frostbite kind of costs them some time, but at the same time, Frostbite looks great. It has great combat. So I guess you're kind of tossing up with six eggs in one hand and half dozen in the other. You know, you're losing something to gain something no matter what you do there, really. So, yeah.
How about combat? How did people feel about the combat in this game?
I loved it so much.
You loved it.
I loved it. I played through the game on Insanity for my second playthrough because I wanted to get all the trophies. I have actually got all the trophies. There's currently a link in your Discord, Hark, if you want to take a look at it. I have gotten all the trophies, which means I played through it on Insanity, and I loved it. It was so much fun. The weapons had such variety, like the sniper rifles felt like sniper rifles because there was this awe-inspiring boom and the impact and the sound that was the sound development was so good with the weapons. And there was just so many different weapons that you could use and so many different styles you could use coming to the profile system and how you could, have 9 different combinations of skills and then 4 different profiles on at one time. And, it just sort of felt so well put together that the combat was never really a problem with me. If you said to me you could play through Mass Effect Andromeda and all you have to do is just play the combat all the time, I'd be fine with that. In fact, I love the multiplayer to it because the combat and the multiplayer is so much fun. It was just, the combat is just so well refined, so smooth. There's so much movement, so much lateral, vertical, horizontal movement in combat, and the jump pack was a great addition, and all these different powers are so much more fun now because there's so much more effects to them. Like there's so much more visual and audio effects to biotic and tech skills now. And if you're going pure soldier, like some people have, there's so many more different combat skills instead of just being like a custom shot and like 4 different types of ammo like it was in Mass Effect 2 or something like that, I think. There's so many more new things that you can try no matter what kind of profile you want to go to. I just kind of felt like the combat was perfect. There was nothing that I would change about it. So there's that, really.
Go ahead, Evan.
Yeah, I also really like the combat. I always feel like very often when you go from one game to the next, like you lose some things and you gain some things. And that was true for Andromeda too. Like I would not say that it's perfect because I did miss a couple things, like the ability to control squad mates a little bit better and what powers they're using and stuff like that. But overall, I thought that there were just so many things that it did really well that it easily my favorite of the whole series. I thought that I loved the return of individual cooldowns for abilities. I liked the fact that you could mix abilities from like the different tech trees, and you weren't sort of restricted to your class in some sense. I liked. I know David was a big fan of the tech constructs. I was a big fan of the tech constructs. I felt like I could return. So the first time I played, maybe going back to the very beginning of our discussion when we were said, what's your go-to class? The first class I played in Mass Effect 1, I think was Infiltrator. And I played it a very sniper rifle heavy user. And I really enjoyed that. And then Mass Effect 2 rolled around and I really don't like the sniper rifle in Mass Effect 2, and part of the whole mess of why I put Mass Effect 2 at the bottom of the list, I think, falls back on that. I always thought I was running out of ammo, and I just didn't enjoy using the sniper rifle. But then back in Andromeda, it came back into its own, and I really felt like I was just having so much fun with the sniper rifle again.
Yeah.
So, my favorite of the series.
Yeah, I was surprised by how much I loved the sniper rifle in Andromeda, because traditionally, not just in the Mass Effect games, but in other games in general, the sniper rifle was just not my style of gameplay, and it just worked really well with my specific writer, and I ended up really enjoying using sniper rifles in there.
And like I even had a few times where like someone's hiding behind cover or something like that, and I hit them with a throw that throws them out of cover, and then sniper shot them as they're flying through. I got lucky, but so much fun that you could do with that.
I used a sniper rifle a few times as well. I never use sniper rifles, and I was like sniping people, and I thought to myself, there's no explosions going on. There's no screens. There's no real action. I'm just standing here killing people. So that's why I like to get like in close and personal. Which brings me to my thoughts about the close combat, or the combat in general.
Combat.
Yeah. So I liked it far more than I thought I would. I'm more of a static person. I like to think. I like the pause. I didn't have any problems here because I got used to it, not having a pause button. But I like having both feet on the ground, basically, and go from cover to cover and do like tactical advances and thinking about my next target. And I did that here as well. And I did love jumping into combat, melee combat, and wreaking havoc. It was great, although I think that I prefer a Mass Effect 2 or 3 combat style, where it's more grounded. It's, I would say, slower paced, because I like the hectic pace as well, but more grounded, more tactical, maybe. I don't know, because I did really enjoy the combat in Mass Effect Andromeda. I remember at the end boss, I actually upped the difficulty because I was spec'd like armor, so I couldn't be killed, basically. So at the end boss, I was multitasking so hard. It was insane. What's my ammo count? Who's the next target? Who's the next target after that? Where can I go? Where do I need to move? Where's my teammates? Do they have builds on? All of those things I had to have in my head at all times when doing that last combat. And it was kind of exhausting, but I loved it. So that's I'm kind of on two minds about this. I feel like in one mind, I'm like, I'd rather be more static and more tactical. And on one hand, I really loved the carnage of just wading into combat and watching all the beautiful particle effects. But in the end, I think I prefer Mass Effect 3 combat over this. Basically, yeah. For all the reason I mentioned.
To piggyback off of David, I did also enjoy the Mass Effect 2 Andromeda combat, but there were definitely two major things about it that I had issue with. One of which David already mentioned, which was the lack of the pause feature, which confuses me because they had it for the previous 3 games and then they decided to take it out. And again, I understood the reasoning behind, I think at least part of the reasoning was because they just wanted the combat to be smoother or more fast-paced or more hectic. And I thought, well, people could choose to just not pause and it would still be, and you can get the best of both worlds. Because unfortunately, there are players like myself who do not have as quick a response time, and therefore we cannot enjoy fast-paced games nearly as much because we just can't keep up. That's one of the reasons why shooters tend to be types of games that I shied away from, is because I just couldn't keep up with the fast-pacedness of shooters. But for games like Mass Effect, I could play those games. Or even for Fallout, I would not be able to play those Fallout games if it wasn't for the VAT system that lets you essentially pause or at least slow down the combat. So when that was taken away from me in Andromeda, it was noticeably more frustrating for me to play the game. And I felt that I had to be less tactical, because I enjoy tactical gameplay and I can be tactical if I can pause the game. But I found myself not having to bump up the difficulty, unfortunately, because I wanted to bump up the difficulty, but I knew that if I did, I was just going to have to restart over and over and over again. So that was disappointing. The other aspect that I missed, but wasn't nearly as big of a problem as the pause feature, was I missed actually having control over the abilities that my companions and squad mates could cast. because that's part of the fun in me. If I could, I would love to have had the Mass Effect combats be similar to Dragon Age, in that you can switch around characters. Like, you don't have to control Shepard all the time. You could control the other characters, because it's fun to play characters other than your own default character. But that's just not how the Mass Effect play style is. So the fact that you could still at least control the powers that your companions did in the first 3 games was a good in between. And then they completely took it away again in Mass Effect Andromeda, and I missed it a lot, because it was cool having my companions in my squad, but then it was less of an incentive. It didn't feel that much different having these 2 characters versus these 2 characters, because I couldn't actually access any of their powers. I could choose what powers they had, but I couldn't actually say, okay, Veteran, now use this power on that one, and meanwhile this character used. It felt like less like I was commanding them as like Commander Shepard does. It felt less like I was commanding them to do things, and it was more they were doing things on their own, which, at least for someone like me who missed that with Shepard, I was disappointed. So
I actually want to follow up on both of those. Let me know if I'm monopolizing too much time, but the first is what you just finished talking about squad mate control. I also felt the same thing. Like, I almost in some ways felt like they weren't there, that the gameplay would not have been very different, that the gameplay would not have been really any different if they weren't there. This is a little bit unfair, because in some cases, like, I would say, I'll let my squad deal with the couple people who are left while I go around and do something else. But I really felt disconnected from the fact that they were there. And then I mentioned earlier that the sort of you gain some, you lose some every time you go from game to game, and I mentioned that before as a loss, but I also agree that tactical pause was a loss. And then the other thing that I wanted to add was that David sort of talked about how he has enjoyed in different ways sort of both the more run and gun intense style of Andromeda as well as the more tactical style of the earlier games. And I also sort of felt kind of similar. Like earlier I mentioned that in Mass Effect 1, I really liked playing someone with a sniper rifle, and I mean, you're not running and gunning with a sniper rifle, you're staying back, being very deliberate and cautious about what you're doing, and playing very tactically. But then I also said that I really, really enjoyed Vanguard in 2 and 3, which, like, you can't get less it's sort of like just boom, go, and you're in the middle of things. And so that's one thing that the Mass Effect series in general, I think, does really well, is give you a variety of different combat styles that all play really well and are fun in different ways. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and sort of Andromeda, I guess you can kind of, I haven't actually tried what charge feels like in Andromeda, but if it's sort of similar before, you can do the same thing in Andromeda better than any of the other games, I feel, is sort of pick which of those 2 extremes you want to be on.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? All right. Now that we've talked a bit about the game, I wanted to start getting into spoiler territory. So I think that we've been pretty good about keeping things relatively spoiler-free up to this point. So for those of you who have not beaten the game, just be aware that we're talking about plot stuff now. I wanted to ask your opinion on the story itself. Like, what do you think of the story? How do you think it stacks up with the other games? It looks like Mikey really wants to talk about this topic. So, do you want to start us off, or do you want to wait?
You know what? I'm going to let David go this time.
You want to let, or Mark or Evan?
Okay.
Actually, can we? Does Mark? Do you have any thoughts on the story before we hear the correct answer?
Sure, I could give my thoughts on the story.
I'm gonna let David just have his correct answer, and I'm gonna just probably not offend him to too much of a degree.
I mean, as a whole, it's like I enjoyed it, but I still do prefer the story of the original trilogy more.
Mm-hmm.
I think the original trilogy was written better. Like there was a structure that I kind of feel got lost in Andromeda somewhere. I thought the at least the villains in the original trilogy were more interesting. I don't know so much about the Ket and the Archon, what their deal is. They just didn't resonate with me as like say the Elusive Man or the Reapers. You know, yeah, that was I don't know. Stuff I did like. I do like the Angara. I love Zhao. Zhao is a fantastic character. He's one of the best additions to this game. I will say that. I just love, yeah, the whole Angara race, like their culture and learning about them and stuff. That was really nice. I do like the squad mates that we have. They were interesting. Although admittedly they are kind of taking inspiration from the original Mass Effect 1 team. Like you could say Drac is similar to Rex. PB is kind of similar to Liara. I know like their personalities are completely different. Like Liara is more quiet and reserved, and PB is more like outspoken. But it's like they're still like researchers who are also sorry. So they kind of took cues from the original trilogy in that regard. The main plot, like going through the planets and stuff, I liked it, but I don't know. It's like I think overall, it's just like something just feels off. Like it's not a Mass Effect game in some way, and I can't really put my finger on it, but just something just feels off, and I'll just leave it at that.
Man, that was a good answer, Mark. Really, that was that was kind of spot on what I was gonna say.
Mark, you got the correct answer.
Nice.
Yeah,
job.
congrats.
Good job.
Yeah.
Good job. You don't have to look at you at your doorstep.
No, I feel like it was not as epic or structurally coherent as many of the other Mass Effect games. Just as you said, I felt even there was one time I don't know if I was stupid, but I didn't understand what was going on. Kind of at one point where there was a hologram and there was a planet and they talked about something, and I was like, what is going on here? I don't understand. So I feel like the urgency of Mass and the mystery of the previous Mass Effect games were better actually than Mass Effect Andromeda. So yeah, I don't think I can say anything more than that Mark haven't said already.
Yeah, I'm going to agree that I felt that the story was not as enjoyable and not as engaging as the stories from the trilogy. Now, it might be hard to really compare the two since one is a trilogy and this one is a single game. But even if I took the stories from any of the individual games from the trilogy, I think that the story of those individual games were still better than the story of this one. I think that, but I thought the story was enjoyable enough that I wasn't uninterested or bored of the story. I think the thing that would have made me more invested or engaged in what was happening event-wise would have been, I thought that they could have done a better job with the companions, actually, with the squad mates, because I never felt nearly as close to the squad mates in this one as I did with the squad mates in the original trilogy. And even then, I don't think I ever got super attached to any of my companions that much in any of the Mass Effect games as I did with the Dragon Age series, but that's another franchise entirely. So, so I don't. A lot of the squad members were just okay for me. And I mean, I like them enough, but I don't think that I ever got fully invested in any of them, and I felt
Do you
that
think it's a sorry? Do you think
Go ahead.
that's a writing issue? Like they didn't resonate with you writing wise, that like not interesting enough?
I think so. I think that that probably is a writing issue. I think that we could have had more scenes or deeper scenes with characters. Like, yes, we had some really good one-on-one scenes with specific characters, but I just never felt there was just something off again. There was just something off about the interactions where I just never felt super close with anyone except for perhaps whoever you might happen to be romancing with. The closest that we went was, and I think David at least agrees with me on this one since he mentioned it, I think, in his Let's Play, is definitely the movie night. The movie night was superbly well done, and after I experienced that scene, I was like, I want more of that. Like, this game should have had more of that kind of stuff, and I just didn't feel that the other scenes were nearly as strong in engaging me or really getting me invested in the characters as the movie night one was.
Well, that's fair. So before I go on my rant/ramble, Evan, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, do you want to say something before we open the floodgates?
So I maybe just have a couple things. The first is sort of, I thought the characters were sort of kind of pretty well done. I am not exactly sure. I feel like I need more time to reflect in maybe another Andromeda game to really start to get the sense of how I feel about them compared with the originals. I will say that I did feel that, and I know at least Hark talked about this in his Let's Play, where he would go and do some missions on a planet and come back to the ship and like no one would have anything new to say.
Yeah.
But I also get the sense that maybe there was kind of as much conversation as in the prior games, but because it was spread out over a larger game, maybe it felt less dense and suffered for that reason. Or if there's just less. I really liked the sort of individual one-on-one scenes that you have with the different characters. I thought that was a great addition. But I also got the sense that there was still something a little bit missing. And I'm not exactly sure what it is, except for like when you have the one towards the end of the game with Drac, where it's like fire-breathing Thresher Maws of Doom or something, and you talk about this game, but you never actually see the game being played, and it's over, and it's like, wait, what? The scene's over now? I kind of, that's actually something that I felt like happened a lot, where it's kind of like, wait, the scene is over, or the quest is over, or something, and it is almost surprising that it finished.
Yeah. I just felt that there were more really interesting things going on with, for example, Morden, I thought, was a super interesting character. I wanted to know more about him. Thane, amazing character. I wanted to know more about him. But then you have people like PB is like, okay, well, PB, we'll do something different with her. She's an Asari, but she's like the opposite personality-wise of Liara. But that was it. Like, that was the only really major interesting thing about PB is she's just not Liara. And I didn't feel like there was really that much more to her, other than she kind of had sort of like the personality of Sarah from Inquisition, kind of, sort of, but not really. So yeah, and then like Drac was fine. He was my Krogan grandpa, basically, my cranpa, as I called him, my cranpa. But
your cranky grandpa. Yes,
but he wasn't that much more unique than Grunt or Rex, really. I feel like the main reason why Jal is such a favorite to so many people is because Jal is the shiny and new character, and they didn't really divert much. Vetra was cool because she's a female Turian. I mean, yeah, she had her thing with her sister, but other than that, I didn't really need to know much more about her, other than the fact that she's Garrus but female, and yeah, I didn't really get much more of her from that, other than that, even though she was a cool character. she wasn't interesting enough for me, like compared to say Thane or Morden or Kasumi.
That's interesting because Drac is my favorite Krogan character of all games. Just because he's so, I think he was he was different because he was not that rage-inducing Krogan. He was so many times he was the voice of reason. When I left the Krogan scouts because I went and rescued the Solarians, he was like, "Okay, I'm gonna be professional and even here, but I'm gonna talk to you back on the ship." And that conversation afterwards were also so. He felt more humanized, more. What's the word again?
Well-rounded.
I forgot the word. Humble than many other Krogans because he's so old and he's seen so many things, and he feels like life is short.
I think.
In a way.
I think the reason why the differences, I understand totally the differences with Drac. I think the reason why that was muted for me was because I felt that the impact of, oh wow, this is such a different Krogan personality-wise, was already given to me by Eve from Mass Effect 3. Eve was like, wow, she's totally different. I mean, granted, she's a female, but she's so different personality-wise from any other Krogan I've met. And I think I've just been so... She was my poster child for this is the other side of Krogan, that when Drac came along, he wasn't different enough compared to Eve, that it was just... That difference was just muted for me, I guess.
Yeah, okay.
But I guess I will agree with you that he is very different from many male Krogan I've met. Although... To be fair, I think the most interesting male Krogan was the poet. The poet. You know, the poet male Krogan.
Yeah.
I was like, I want that Krogan to be a companion. I want that to be a squad member. Because he's interesting. Not that Drac isn't interesting, but I felt that if there was going to be a male Krogan I would have wanted on my team, it would have been either that or even who is the one who ended up dating Drac's like daughter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I would have loved to have had him as a squad member personally. He would have been awesome just because, again, he's very different and he's like nerdy, like smart. And I was like, I love nerdy, smart Krogan. But anyway.
No, I was actually confused by his name. I thought it was Hark because there was a Krogan named Hark.
His name was Hark. Yes.
Yeah.
And he was orange. I was so happy about the orange.
Yeah. But yeah, to open the floodgates, you guys are probably a lot more correct than you guys realized I was about to say. But a lot of my problems in Andromeda's writing, as a writer myself, and having tried to write books for years now, and trying to get them published, is Mass Effect Andromeda's staff did not have a single writer on it. Not a single writer was credited for Mass Effect Andromeda's story. And if you look at a game like Witcher 3, it had 5 very successful published writers and then 15 quest developers alongside that. And that was probably one of the best RPGs ever made. Mass Effect Andromeda's story to me felt disjointed in the sense that the up and down flow of action felt very stiff, and like instead of it being like a slow climb and slow decline, it was just more of a sharp decline, then a cliff face, and a sharp decline, then a cliff face, because parts of Mass Effect Andromeda were, as far as I'm concerned, the opening scene, which had a lot of action in it. Your guy dies, it's very emotional, and then there's just that peace and quiet between trying to get yourself set up to be a Pathfinder, and then going to EOS, another sharp incline, going to the Vault, sharp incline, that drops off, and then you head off to Aya, sharp incline when you find the Archon is hunting for you, then sharp decline when you get to Aya. It's just like this constant, almost what's the word I forget, like sawtooth kind of rhythm where it goes really sharp up and down again, which isn't how you're meant to write. It's supposed to be more of a hill, but and there was some great scenes that made me kind of go, oh yeah, this is definitely, it made me hate the Ket more than most people probably did, because I'm a very emotionally charged person. Like on his ship where you experience him talking about all the races, you see all the dead Solarians who have had organs chopped out of them when they were still alive. When he kidnaps your brother or sister, There's various other scenes in the game that make me feel like, yeah, this is a Mass Effect game, but they're so few and far between that they kind of just peter out and don't really do much overall, as far as I'm concerned. The companions, I'm going to stand by my girl Vetra till the day I die. I'll die on that hill. I won't really care. I'll die on it. I've been called an apologist before because someone said to me, I think it was the Discord channel I'm in, I was chatting about Mass Effect Andromeda, and he's like, Mass Effect Andromeda is shite. All the characters are, sorry, I swore, all the other characters are, they're basically just copycats of all of the previous 3 games. And he was like, oh, who would you like? I'm like, I like Vetra a lot. And he goes, well, Vetra's basically just Garrus with, who's just female, and, she was a citizen, of Turian. She was a Turian citizen who didn't like the system. And I'm like, no, that's completely wrong, man. She was never a Turian citizen. Her father took her away from Paladin before she was able to earn her citizenship. And, I don't mind being wrong about things. I like being corrected because I want to be correct. But when you're trying to diss something because you either didn't pay attention or you didn't really take the time to learn, that's what irritates me. And I just kind of dropped the conversation and left. But Vetra, to me, Vetra, Drac, and Cora grew on me throughout the game. Cora grew on me an awful lot more after the Asari arc and her going through her character development. To start, I didn't like her, as I said to you, Hark. I wasn't a big fan of Cora to start. Vetra was always my favorite because she had this sassy, attitude that's like, oh yeah, I'll whatever you need, I can get, whatever I can get, you need. She had that attitude of her that I liked. Drac was just this grumpy old asshole that I loved a bit because I just loved him so much. And like I would have loved to meet Drac when he was 500 years younger. Can you imagine that 500 years younger Drac would have been hilarious to me to interact with? But I loved him a bit because he's just such a badass. He's so old, but he's such a cranky old man at the same time. I love it. And then Cora grew on me because she goes from relying on other people to realizing that sometimes you have to be the trendsetter. You have to be the one that does something. And then she goes out and plants a rose garden on Eos, which was, I thought, one of the better scenes in the game emotionally. One of the major reasons that I felt that the companions were very this way for me compared to the other games was Jal was good, but he didn't really. He was very all over the place with his personality and writing. Because when you start off with him, he's like, Milky Way, don't like these people. And then he almost immediately goes, you can be useful to us. And then he joins your squad. And he gets along with you pretty well. And then, you go to the exaltation thing. And he then, he's very emotional, obviously. But you can see that, there's this very disjointed kind of connection that doesn't really work out too well. But at the same time, you can see that he interacts with the other characters a lot better than he does with Ryder, especially with Vetra and PB. A lot of those interactions are hilarious. Liam just drove me up a wall. Liam physically made me want to fight him. Not to say that any of the voice acting was bad. All the voice acting was great. A lot of the voice acting was done amazingly. Cheryl Shee was amazing as Vetra. Liam's voice actor was good. Don't remember his name though. Cora's voice actor was good. Mail Rider's voice actor was good though. I don't remember his name either. I didn't really like Sarah Ryder's voice as much as I liked Mail Rider's voice, but she was okay too. Just in general, it felt like the game had a lot of puzzle pieces that were kind of just shoved together in order to try and make the game work, and that kind of made me feel very upset about how you could have just taken some extra time and made those puzzle pieces fit a bit better, or that kind of thing. And the thing that kind of upsets me the most about the fact that Andromeda might never be continued is that I will lose probably one of my favorite romance options ever in any of the games, and that's Vetra, because I just loved her romance so much. Even though I will agree entirely, Evan said about how there's not enough content with it. There's definitely not enough content. There's definitely not enough one-on-one conversations. There's definitely not enough options for, never once could you go up to any of the romance characters you've romanced and say, hey, when we get back to the Nexus, you want to go for a drink? And there's a quick scene of you two drinking in a bar together and the conversation or something. I don't know. It may not seem like a big thing, but when it's 75 hours of playthrough, which is what I think of my first playthrough clocked through as when I finished at 97% on hardcore. It does feel like there's a big gap between those scenes, and that big gap makes it feel like, you're not really connected as much as you feel like you should be, especially with someone like Vector, who quite obviously loves Ryder to bits. If you watch her romance or if you film it yourself, you can tell just from the way that she looks at you and the way that she speaks about you that she is head over heels in love with Ryder, male or female, and that in and of itself makes me feel like if Vector was in any other of the games, any of them, like 1, 2, or 3, it would be very likely that she would be high in contention for one of the most loved characters in the game trilogy. It's just that she happened to be unlucky enough to be in this one. And the funniest thing is, I've talked to people who said that Vector was supposed to be like a fan servicey character because everyone's like, oh, we want a female Turian. She's probably one of the best characters in the game. So as far as I'm concerned, there's definitely a lot worse, but there's definitely some things that could have been done a lot better with her. But overall, I'm happy with certain things, very unhappy with other things. And I think specifically the worst thing about it is that the antagonist, the Archon and the Ket, feel very tacked on and sort of like stealing from the Reapers in a way, and that when they exalt somebody, it's basically like the Reapers taking somebody and turning them into a husk or whatever else, a Marauder shields. It's very much a case of they feel very stolen or ripped from the first 3 games because they didn't really have much time to make anything else up. But I did like how they threw in, wildlife and other stuff to fight as well. Sure. Yeah, there's my floodgates. I need to take a drink.
When you were talking about, it would have been nice if we could have just got to our romance and had a little short scene of you having a drink. I don't understand why they haven't done this since Dragon Age Origins, but having a kiss option to be able to kiss your romance anytime you want. I love that in Origins. I don't know why they stopped doing that for every other game after Origins, because it was also there in Knights of the Old Republic. If you romanced there were 2 characters you could have romanced, and you could have done that. And I think they also did it in Jade Empire, where you could kiss your romance. So I don't know why they stopped doing that, because it didn't seem like it would be that hard to include or take that much time to include. And it adds so much. Is it? Actually, can you do that in Inquisition?
I thought you could, actually.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that you can approach a romance and be like, hey, do you want to sip off for a bit?
Oh, you're right. I think yes, you're right. They did bring that back for Inquisition.
But they should have run into this game, because when you're stuck on a ship alone for a long time, people get frisky, would be the term I use.
Yeah, so something like that can add a lot. Go ahead, David. David.
Yeah. How amazingly awesome. I mean, Korra's romance sex scene is so well made when it comes to animation. And I don't mean like the sex part, but her facial animations and the pacing and how they interrupt each other. It's on a whole nother level. I mean, they took that scene and handmade it, basically. Because if you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's a lot of nudity.
David wants us to go and watch the sex scene right now.
It's the most explicit sex scene in a Mass Effect game. But leading up to that, the facial animations, and it's so good, so well made. So I think that's where all the facial animation went into.
This is a funny thing, right? The guy who made that scene, animated scenes in Uncharted 4 and stuff. I remember talking to someone about this. The guy who made that scene and some scenes involving the Archon is a very, very, very talented animator. And he was brought on towards the end of it, being like, here's some scenes we need you to do. Just do as well as you can in this time you had left. He made, I think, the scene where the Archon is chatting with you on the Hyperion about how he stole your sister or brother, depending. And he made the Korra sex scene, which is one of the best overall animated sex scenes, or kissing scenes even.
The eyes and the facial expressions, so good.
Yeah, just in general, it's a very, very good scene. But the thing is that I didn't like Korra romantically, so I missed on that. So Korra romantically kind of missed on that scene.
I will also agree with you too, Mikey, in that I was very surprised by how much I ended up not liking Liam as much.
Yeah, Liam made me
he-
Liam made me physically angry sometimes.
Yeah, I liked him fine in the beginning, and I guess I expected his character to be one way, and then he ended up being something else, and it just didn't jive with me. He just yeah. Um,
Like
So, I don't-
he starts off as very good willed, and you're like, oh yeah, he's gonna be a total bro, and then eventually he's just a bit of a dick.
Yeah.
Just a bit
When
of a
he
dick.
when he started giving the line about, I think it's during his quest, and he was like, it's gonna work out in the end. That's just how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to work that way. And I'm like, really, dude? Really? That annoyed me so much. Like, how? Like, okay, I mean, I'm pretty naive myself in real life. I'm a pretty naive person in general, but I don't think I would ever say anything like that. So I was like, what?
Like the thing is that this isn't even like it's a combat scene where you're supposed to invade a fucking rundown ketch ship, and it's like, oh, it should always when you have good intentions, everything should work out. I'm like, Liam, I want to eject you out that airlock myself.
I mean, maybe it's because they were trying to go for something humorous, because his quest, his loyalty mission is supposed to be, the tone is supposed to be very comedic, but I think that one came off a little bit like it was just off. I think from the.
Then there's PB, who I'm just kind of meh about. PB was neither good nor bad as far as I'm concerned. She didn't grow on me. I didn't grow to hate her. She just kind of ended up being somewhere in the middle. That was basically it for me with character-wise.
So
Honestly,
I
still
actually really like. Actually, let me talk about Liam first.
Okay, go ahead.
I kind of agree about Liam. Although it's kind of weird because I thought he was kind of he seemed all right to start off with, and then he had the loyalty, and I actually liked him on the loyalty mission. I also really liked his loyalty mission gameplay-wise. Probably the most fun mission in the entire series.
Yeah.
But I kind of liked, and for example, I didn't mind that line that you mentioned. I mean, he was saying it kind of sarcastically is how I interpreted it. But for some reason, sort of after the mission and later on, I'm not entirely sure. That's where I sort of started to feel kind of, I'm not sure what I think about Liam.
His banter gets
I
really
didn't like
nasty
him.
too.
Yeah, I didn't like him.
Yeah. One of the things that I decidedly disliked about Liam is if you bring him alongside of Vectra in your Nomad, he starts asking about why she brought her sister with her, and I'm like, expletive, idiot, Liam. Why would you leave a teenage girl alone in a galaxy?
Yeah. There's a few. There were a few banter combinations that seemed really sort of ill-mannered, or I don't know. Which in a way I almost kind of like, because it's sort of maybe more realistic that you have a couple personality clashes if you have so many people on a ship. But maybe that realism isn't necessarily a good thing.
I think that they executed better in, say, a game like Dragon Age Origins, because you knew, for example, that Morgan and Alistair, you knew that they were going to bicker and butt heads, but they did it in a way where it was still funny, it was still entertaining and funny, whereas the banter here, they were just being nasty just to be nasty, and that's just not entertaining to me. That was more soap opera-y. So
that's entirely a point. Liam felt more like a soap opera character than did anything else. He felt like he was just riling Vectra up to annoy her, to try and get her to say something mean back.
Yeah,
and
I think Inquisition had the same problem. I think a lot of the banter between Inquisition was not entertaining. It was just mean, and I don't know. I just didn't enjoy listening to it nearly as much as, say, Origins, because at least when Alistair and Morgan would argue, it was hilarious. There was just some lightheartedness to it. So
Alistair would always crack a joke, and Morgan would always moan at him because he's making the joke again.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like they would compromise the mission in a way when
Right.
Morgan and Alistair were batting it out, whereas it felt like they disagreed and
Yeah.
but realized that they disagree and were willing to set that aside, whereas it felt more antagonistic sometimes.
Dragon Age 2 definitely had that issue with like Fenris and Anders. Don't get me started on Anders. But anyway, that was also a problem in that game too, where
Anders.
Yeah.
Basically, the entire Dragon Age 2, just shaking your fist and shouting Anders.
Yes. Anyway.
Anyway, I was also going to defend PB there, which is I actually really liked PB. From a character perspective, I felt that she was kind of I don't know if interesting is the word, but she felt like she was really adding something to the game to me. It felt like she had a bit of a character arc. She had personality, and I actually really liked PB. She's one of my favorites of the squad, I think, actually. And then the other thing I was going to talk about that was brought up a while back was the Archon. And I think Mikey mentioned that he felt that the Archon was ripped from the original trilogy. I feel less that, but I do feel that he fell short in the sense that the Ket felt like a really black and white villain to me, which is always, I mean, if I think back through the various BioWare games, I mean, you've got like the Blight, you've got the Breach and the demons and stuff, and Inquisition, you've got the Sith and KOTOR, you've got the Reapers and Mass. So, I mean, in some sense, they're all black and white. Maybe Jade Empire is somewhat of an exception there, but even that was black and white, basically. But there was a scene that kind of gave me real hope right at the beginning of the game where the Archon lands at the atmosphere processor, whatever it is, on Habitat 7, and walks up and like he tries to duplicate what Alec Ryder did to restart the processor, and he almost looks like sad and despondent that he can't make it work. And I really wanted that to sort of carry through, and was disappointed that it didn't.
Yes, I actually caught that too during my Let's Play and commented on that I saw the same thing on Habitat 7 and was disappointed that his character was not as complex as I want, or their motives were not as complex as they seem to be.
Yeah.
And then you and I had like a half an hour long discussion just about how we felt the Ket would evolve as like villains or like anti-heroes or that kind of thing, but no, they're just straight up.
Yeah, I thought that was disappointing.
I guess the other thing that I wanted to mention was I don't necessarily think I would have liked her as a person, but as a character, I actually really liked Addison. And I don't know if, like, especially David would agree, but like I felt that she was well motivated. Her demeanor was sort of well motivated, and she also had a character arc where like she started out very distrustful, but then gradually got more and more trusting of the Pathfinder and respectful of the Pathfinder. And it felt like she was making hard decisions and trying to make the most of the hard decisions, like with the 3 sabers thing. Maybe it was not the 3, but whenever she hired the mercenaries that wound up going rogue. And then the Dr. Kennedy aspect. So I actually, and I could see someone who is kind of temperamental and not the nicest person to work with, but still really competent, actually being put into her position. And I actually thought that she was like one of the best written characters in the game almost. So that's what I have to say about Addison.
Yeah, my favorite part of David's Let's Play was watching him to react to Addison. I loved relishing on all of the moments. Like, let me see what David says about Addison in this scene.
You're not a pathfinder until you've path found. Or whatever.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I love your reaction to that. Yes.
That makes no sense.
I loved your reaction. So good.
But yeah, I mean, I don't dislike Addison. As you said, she's got reason for believing what she believes in. But sometimes she was just a bit too much. Like, sure, respect should be earned, but I have gone through training and I know what I'm doing. You have path. Oh God, that is so stupid. No.
In some sense, I agree with you, but I also felt that it really worked in context for her character, which is sort of like drawing the distinction between Addison as a person and Addison as a character.
Yeah. I was just so surprised when I'm Pathfinder writer, and she's like, "You're not Pathfinder until you Pathfind something," and I'm like, "What?" It's my title. Well, is a general not a general until he's like general something?
Yeah.
Like, oh.
Or a firefighter, not a firefighter, until he actually fights a fire.
Yeah.
I think that's what. Isn't that what you said?
Yeah.
I think yeah, which is a very good point. So.
Yeah. Just a quick thing on PB. I think that PB was my relationship with PB was very complex. Oh, what a roller coaster.
Yes.
So I thought she was going to be some sort of Sarah character. And Sarah is probably the character I dislike the most in any Bioware game. Oh, I can't stand her. But I kind of respect PB's intelligence.
David, you said it right.
Yeah. I kind of respect PB's intelligence and drive, but her spontaneity is kind of driving me up the wall. Like when she gets on the escape pod down on the planet.
Oh God.
And I'm like, we're okay, right? I had to pause the game and like, no, here's the reasons why this is not okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yes.
Like,
you and I both.
Yeah.
We both had an issue with that a lot.
In the end, she came through to. I mean, I kind of liked her in the end, though, even though we had this very complex relationship, and that kind of surprised me, to be honest.
I think again that might fall back on person versus character, where like maybe you wouldn't want to have, if in real life you wouldn't want to have someone like PB on your team, but for this story, it worked well. And she had character to that, like she starts out impulsive and sort of like eventually realizes and sends you that email and says, "This was a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry."
Exactly. She's like not like unreasonable.
And going from sort of having, what did she say? Having a foot half out the door, whenever, to being fully on the team. Like she had a character arc. It was good.
Yeah.
Other thoughts on the game? Not necessarily characters.
Suvi.
Sure, let's talk about Suvi.
Oh yeah, Suvi.
He was cool.
Suvi and Callow. And Gil, of course.
No, that's Suvi.
I was going to talk about Gil and Callow too, but no, let's start with Suvi.
Yeah, I really enjoyed my conversation with Suvi, and this is a religious thing. So I'm not religious. Suvi is religious, and it was nice to see her reasoning behind her religion and how she thought about the universe as a scientist and being a religious person. We didn't agree at all, but it was very interesting to see where she was coming from. And I think that's in the scientific studies, there are many religious people that thinks like Suvi.
Yeah.
And it was very kind of refreshing to hear her side of this discussion. Even though, as I said, we don't agree, we kind of agree to disagree, because she was a good person and she was a good scientist, and like it was cool. It was a cool. I think that it was very brave of them of putting that in there because it's a hot topic.
Yeah.
But then again, Bioware hasn't been. They tackle these things head on, like homosexuality, transgender, religion. I like that.
Suvi was definitely a character I really connected with a lot because her stance on religion was very similar to my own. Because I consider myself to be a very big sciencey, math and sciencey kind of person, very logical kind of person. But at the same time, I also do have a side of myself that I am a religious. I consider myself to be a religious person. So talking to her was fascinating because I was like, oh, that's basically like almost how I think, and I'm not used to that because topics like that are not normally brought up in video games, and which I think is a shame because I feel like there is a stigma to bringing up topics like that because it's so controversial. And I think that the reason why it's controversial is because people aren't used to having it brought up in mainstream things like video games, so they're uncomfortable because like I don't know how to deal with this. And I think that if we are able to introduce things like that into stuff like video games more, then people will be less, I guess, the stigma will not be as large, and people will have a much easier time or will be more comfortable with that topic in general. So
I have to agree. Sylvie was probably one of my most favorite characters in that she definitely was one of the most individualized. She had her own personality and her own beliefs and her own interactions, because she's just like, I have this Earl Grey tea from back home, and once it's gone, I won't have any other left, more tea from London or wherever. Well, she's from Belfast, so wherever she got that tea. And you have to think to yourself, wow, that's, it's very impressive to me how Sylvie is scientific belief and religious practices sort of meld into this very interesting character that I thought was both intriguing and very enjoyable to chat to. She had a lot of different ways for me to kind of just go, oh yeah, that's a very interesting point. Let's elaborate on that, because Sylvie and I have very opposite. What's the word for it? We have very really antithesis. We're very opposed opinions on religion. So having a genuine discussion with her felt very interesting to me because it was just so unique to her.
Mm-hmm. Any other characters stood out for people?
Hello and Gil. That conversation. I gotta go.
Okay. I think this was mentioned before, but the Gil and Kahlo thing. So I wasn't that entertained by their constant bickering, but I did enjoy the discussion that you have with Kahlo one-on-one about his crewmates after the fact, if you side with him versus siding with Gil. I don't know, that was one conversation that really got to me, and one of the more memorable conversations that I had with my crewmates on Andromeda. So I thought that the writing for that was very well done, and it just made me really enjoy Kahlo's character a lot more.
I think I would say that I did kind of. I'm not sure that. I think it probably could have been done a little less antagonistically, if that makes sense. But I did enjoy the tension between the two of them. I felt like in the original game, maybe I'm omitting something. I guess Mass Effect 2 had a couple things that you could resolve once you do like Jack and Miranda's loyalty or Tali and Legion's loyalty. But other than those cases, it felt like the ships in the original series were kind of rainbows and bunnies where everyone got along. And so I kind of liked that there was some disagreement that you had to broker. So yeah. And I think I kind of got I don't know if I'm talking about the same scene as you, but with Kahlo, where he is explaining why he's taking the side that he is and the memories of building the ship and stuff like that. I sided with Gil, and I still got that scene if it's the same one.
Oh, okay.
And so I I like that. Yeah, that's well done.
Other thoughts on the game?
This is the only game, I believe, the only Mass Effect game where no follower can die. Right?
Oh, is that true?
Mass Effect 1, you had one of Ashley Arcade, and 2, you had basically the entire cast who could die.
Corrects as well.
Yeah, Rex could die as well in the first one. So you had like those three. The second game, you had basically everyone who could die.
Yeah.
And the third game, you could kill Ashley or Caden. Thane died. Who else? I'm trying to think.
Tali could
Samara.
die.
Tali could die. Samara could die.
Yeah, I mean,
a lot of them.
That was kind of sad.
Well, in a way, I can understand it because you don't really want to be killing off like if you could kill off say 3 people in the original in this cast, that would be basically half of your companions gone. So you don't really want to be doing that.
Yeah,
I mean, you could always kill off people on the ship otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's the overarching problem I had with Andromeda is that I didn't feel that the stakes were really that high. Then again, I mean, Mass Effect 1, 2, 3, the whole galaxy was at stake. So,
yeah.
I think I would kind of extend that and say that I felt like, to an extent, consequences were missing. Like, before I said that something that I really liked about the game was that there were a lot of really hard decisions. And there were, but for the most part, like, they didn't really play out in Andromeda. They didn't really have much consequence based on what you chose. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like in Mass Effect 1, you have the Rachni decision, and that doesn't have an effect until Mass Effect 3. And so you have stuff like that, and many of these decisions probably would be followed up in later Andromeda games.
Yeah.
But I felt like the only decision that had a big impact that I made was when I didn't convince Avidus Rix to take over the Pathfinder job. And alternate universe spoilers if you did convince him, but what happens is that there's no Turian Pathfinder now, which means your force is weaker at the end of the game, and as a result, Dunn dies. So that decision had a impact later on. But interestingly enough, that's Avidus Rix wasn't one of the really hard decisions on my sort of list of the ones that I really liked having to make.
Just having this discussion kind of make me miss Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3 more. I mean, not get me wrong, I really liked Mass Effect Andromeda, but I just kind of, I don't know if it's just nostalgia talking, but I just love those games. And that's one of the reasons I'm not like super sad that Andromeda is finished, because as Casey Hudson said, that he's definitely interested in exploring Mass Effect again. And then maybe I get one of those lovely Mass Effect stories that I can enjoy in that aspect like I did before.
Do you think they would somehow continue back in the Milky Way galaxy?
Yes, I think so.
Somehow find a way around the 3 choices?
Prequel or maybe a prequel, or maybe something that's going on as the war's going on. I don't know. I don't know how they're going to do that. But
some multi-universe collection of stories where you travel between them.
I don't know. Oh yeah.
I've had very in-depth discussions about what would happen. The thing is, a prequel to Mass Effect 1, 2, or 3 wouldn't change anything, because we've all seen the codexes. We know how the First Contact War ends. Yeah. We know how the Rachni Wars end. Right. We know the Coven Rebellions end. It's a story that's already been written, which to me, if you went through it and played it as a game, it wouldn't have the impact that Mass Effect 1, 2, or 3 had.
It would have to be on a smaller scale, basically. Like a band of brothers kind of thing. Like they go on an adventure on some desert planet and have to help each other out.
Or something like Rogue One, where you know how it ends, but you don't know the details of what went on with with the stuff with Rogue One.
Yeah, like, I mean, I would agree there. There's still a lot of stories that you can tell even if you know the overall arc. I mean, Hark mentioned Rogue One, but also think about like Titanic. I mean, guess what? You go into Titanic, you know it's going to be at the bottom of the ocean at the end of the movie. But it is still like horrendously Oscar winning and made lots of money and lots of people really liked it. There was something else I was going to, even in the original series of Mass Effect, I mean, how is this story going to end? The Reapers win? I mean, you kind of know that it's a game, it's a story, it's written for people. You know it's going to have a positive-ish resolution at the end. It's how the journey is how you get there.
Not really though, because in Mass Effect 2 everyone can die and you can lose. So there is ways to not have a positive outcome. It's just that you have to screw up to a degree that's kind of funny. But,
or you can shoot the Star Child at the end of 3. I mean, I'm not saying there's not to have, but
like, I can understand why you're saying, bring it back, have it be a smaller scale thing. But a lot of the reasons that Mass Effect 1, 2, 3, and Andromeda to a degree worked is because it's a large scale game. A bit more linear. For my sake of not being up till 4 a.m. playing it because I need to finish it. Please, yes, slightly more linear would be nice. I believe that it has come to a stage where if Mass Effect 5, or whatever they want to call it, is, like a Band of Brothers style where it's like, you're following a group of people through like one of the Rachni Wars or the First Contact War, or the Krogan rebellions. And in those scenarios, other than the Turian rebellion, other than the First Contact War, you wouldn't have humans in it because humans only came in during the First Contact War.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't have a human protagonist. You'd have to play something else, which wouldn't really be to BioWare's style when coming to Mass Effect games. That they're going to figure something out, and if they can't, they'll just go, well, we'll just make a sequel or something like that to Andromeda, because the foundation of Andromeda is pretty solid. It's just that what was built on top of it was kind of rickety.
Yeah, I mean, the other option that is I've thought about what to do about if you were to do a Milky Way sequel. And I think my favorite option is just have BioWare, I mean, this would probably make a lot of people angry, but I think not rationally, is pick an ending and say, we're just going to explore what happens in this universe. We're not saying that this is the canon choice or what's the correct choice or what you should have done at the end of 3. We just need to continue somehow.
Yeah.
And we're going to continue in this universe. I think might be the best way to resolve these issues. I mean, it's obviously not an ideal solution, but
I
don't think there is an ideal solution. So
yeah, I definitely can see that being very problematic, unfortunately.
Yeah, especially if you pick Destroy, because I think in Destroy, Shepard usually lives. So if you're going with the optimal best ending in like one of the 3, and you pick Destroy and they go, okay, Shepard lives, do we have the player play Shepard still? Do we have them play someone who knew Shepard? Do we have them play anybody else? And the question usually is no, we'll have them play Shepard because Shepard is known and loved.
Yeah, I mean, I think one idea would be, say, we think it would be interesting to explore what happens in the Control universe where you have all these Reapers still sitting around. How do people react to that? I think that could be the basis for a story.
Yeah,
I'm just sure Shepard is alive in that to a degree. We'll play Jimmy Vega, it'll be fine. Jimmy Vega is not a new protagonist.
Somebody should make a campaign out of that or something. Anyway. That's
okay. Trade-off. Link in the description. I have no idea really. Like they've kind of put themselves at a dead end. The walls are slowly closing in around them.
What they could
want
do
escape
is
hatch.
They could bring in the original Mass Effect team, which we all know and love, and do a sequel to Andromeda. Like a new team or something. I mean,
that's what I would love.
Work.
That's what I would like to see personally. I feel like there is a lot of potential in the Andromeda universe still.
Because as you guys said, there's not much you can do going forward in the Mass Effect universe, in the galaxy, Milky Way galaxy. Unfortunately,
like they've kind of just caught themselves in a big bubble of, well, if we go back to it, then people will be upset that we didn't pick the ending they wanted, or we're not giving them the story they wanted.
But I love that.
If we go back to Andromeda,
yeah. But I love that Mass Effect has a beginning and an end. Like, it's a complete story.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think Andromeda really is the only way they can really move forward with it, honestly. Whether people like it or not.
I mean, that's what I'm hoping.
Unless Casey Hudson has like a genius idea out of nowhere.
Parallel universes.
No, please no.
I also plan to boycott like every BioWare game until they release a new Mass Effect game. There's that. Don't like Anthem anyway, it's not really my thing. I'll probably be upset when I don't play Dragon Age, but hey, I'll manage. You're fine.
I'll have fun for the both of us.
Yeah, I'll watch your Let's Play.
Anything else before we close? Any other final thoughts?
No, I don't particularly. If they're going to continue Andromeda, please bring like all the characters except for Liam back. Like retire Liam. Liam decided to go settle down somewhere. I don't care. Just get rid of Liam.
He's happy with his couch. Just leave him with his couch.
Yeah, leave him with his couch on Yoast with like, you know, a beer. He'll be fine. He'll be fine. He'll manage.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I can't really think of anything.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again to the four of you for joining me for this talk. Hopefully, those of you who are watching maybe learned something new or heard something interesting or fascinating that you might have not have thought about. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to hang out with us and listening to our thoughts and musings on a game that, again, a lot of people have many opinions on. And hopefully, no matter what, we will still be able to enjoy something out of BioWare. Hopefully something in the Mass Effect franchise in some form, whatever it might be, that will move it in a more positive direction than it has been currently. And we'll just have to wait and see. So thanks guys so much, and until next time, love yourselves and love each other.